Reality is an illusion, the universe is a hologram, buy gold, buy, essa a Bill Cipher, perto do final da primeira temporada, aparecendo depois de ser invocada por uma criança dentro da tenda de telepatia, e isso sempre me marcou, porque supostamente o ser mais inteligente da série, uma criatura capaz de ver através de dimensões. É a primeira coisa que faz com uma plateia cativa gritar, conselho financeiro sem nexo e desaparecer. Tonight we are going through every character in Gravity Falls and ranking them by intelligence, from the goat chewing on a tin can at the bottom to the cosmic thing at the very top, and along the way I want to keep pulling on that thread. The strange way this show keeps letting raw brain power loose to something smaller and sneakier. So get comfortable, turn the lights down low, settle in, we are going to be here a while, and if you have not subscribed yet, it genuinely does help us keep making these long quiet ones for you. We should start at the very bottom, and the very bottom of Gravity Falls is not a person at all. It is the animals, the instinct-level minds, the creatures that are not thinking so much as reacting, and the series is full of them, sitting in the corners of scenes doing very little except being funny. The clearest one is Gompers, the goat who lives around the mystery shack and eats absolutely anything. Tin cans, invitations, in one moment a piece of paper that mattered to the plot, and he is exactly what he looks like. A background gag with 4 legs and no plan. There is no hidden depth to Gompers. He is not secretly a genius. He is a goat. And the show loves him precisely because he asks for nothing. Depois o Waddles, e por agora, esta noite, quero ser cuidadoso e classificar a verso comum do Waddles. O porco que amable ganha numa feira ao adivinhar o peso certo dele. E que ela passa a amar mais do que a maior parte das pessoas na vida dela. As a normal pig, Waddles is affectionate and loyal, and about as bright as a normal pig, which is to say he can find Mabel and he can find food, and that is roughly the extent of the ambition. But there is a lovely bit of real history behind that pig that most people never hear. Waddles exists because of Alex Hirsch's twin sister, Ariel. The two of them grew up spending summers with relatives, and the whole show is built out of those summers, but the pig specifically is a tribute. Because as a kid, Ariel wanted a pet pig so badly that she built what the crew has described as a little pig shrine in her room, a small monument to the pet she was not allowed to have. So Hirsch gave the pig to Mabel, who is largely based on Ariel, as a gift across time. Hold on to the fact that Waddles is down here at the bottom for now, because this pig is going to make one of the strangest jumps up the entire ranking later, and when it happens, it involves a real astrophysicist. The rest of the bottom shelf is monsters and creatures who run on appetite. The gnomes, led by the one named Jeff, are a good example, because from a distance they look like they might be clever, they set traps, they operate as a group, they even try to trick Mabel into becoming their queen, but the moment their plan meets any resistance, it collapses into a swarm of small angry men who can be defeated with a leaf blower. Their intelligence is the intelligence of a wasp nest. There is coordination, but there is no real thought, just a shared instinct pointed in one direction. The Gremloblin, the creature whose gaze shows you your worst nightmare, is pure animal threat with a supernatural gimmick attached. No strategy at all. The Summerween trickster, the creature made of unwanted candy, is a little craftier. It lures children and it bargains, but it is a monster running a monster script. A couple of these creatures are worth pausing on, not for their brains, but for what the crew hid inside their design, because that is really the point of a show like this. Take the multi-bear, the many-headed creature who lives in a cave and famously loves a particular pop song and is spared by Dipper in an early episode about proving your manliness. In the behind-the-scenes special the crew hosted, called Between the Pines, they mention that the multi-bear went through a much sillier working name during production. One they say they kept around specifically because it set up a line they wanted Dipper to say. That is the whole ethos of Gravity Falls in miniature. A joke buried 2 layers deep, kept alive across the entire production pipeline just to land one small moment. And the creatures Dipper has to impress to reach that cave, the Manitors, the hyper-masculine beef jerky summoned beasts, are a comedic riff on the Minotaur, borrowing the name and the bull-like build and twisting them into a cartoon about fragile male ego, with none of the labyrinth or the curse from the old Greek story. None of these creatures are smart. But somebody very smart decided exactly how dumb each one should be, and why. So that is the floor. Instinct, appetite, and a goat. What is interesting is how quickly, as we climb up out of the animals and into the townspeople, the series stops rewarding raw brain power at all, and starts rewarding something much harder to measure. The next rung up belongs to two men whose job is literally to think, and who have decided, permanently, not to. Sheriff Blubbs and Deputy Durland are the law in Gravity Falls, and they are the purest expression of a very specific kind of stupidity, the kind that is a choice rather than a limit. It is not that Blubbs and Durland cannot solve a case. It is that they have discovered that if you declare every case unsolvable quickly enough, you can go to lunch. They laugh at evidence. They ignore the obvious. When a genuine mystery lands in front of them, their instinct is to close the file so they can get back to enjoying each other's company. And that phrase turns out to matter more than it seems. Here is the part that genuinely surprised people when it aired. In the very last stretch of the series, during the finale, Blubbs and Durland are confirmed on screen to be a couple. It is played warmly, almost offhandedly, two men who have clearly loved each other the whole time. And it recolors every lazy afternoon they spent avoiding work together. And there is a wonderful piece of production history sitting underneath it. When Hirsch marked the 10th anniversary of the show, he started posting the real notes he had received over the years from Disney's Standards and Practices Department, the internal censors, and there were, by his own account, thousands of them. One of those notes flagged an early scene where Blubbs puts his arm around Durland's shoulder, warning that it read as, in their word, flirtatious. Hirsch wrote back that no, they were just buddies, and the note was approved on that basis. In that context, which is quietly hilarious in hindsight, because the finale confirms the censor was reading the scene correctly the entire time, and the series simply waited them out. That reveal did not survive everywhere, and this is one of those facts that tells you how the series traveled around the world. In the finale, the two of them have a line about being mad with power and love, and in a number of territories that restrict LGBTQ content, the words and love were physically cut, leaving them merely mad with power. The relationship that the show had smuggled past its own censors got quietly edited back out again once it crossed certain borders. It is a small thing and an enormous thing at the same time, and it is worth remembering when you rank these two at the bottom of the competence ladder that the writers clearly adored them, because that is the thing about the willfully incompetent tier. Blubbs and Durland are terrible at their jobs, they are near the bottom of any honest intelligence ranking, and the series never punishes them for it, never treats their stupidity as a moral failing. They are happy. They are together. In a story that is, underneath everything, about how cleverness can wreck your life, there is something almost enviable about two men who decided a long time ago that they did not need to be. Right beside them on this shelf sits the wider cast of Gravity Falls townsfolk, the low-function comic relief who make the town feel lived in. Toby Determined, the local newspaperman with the sunken face and the desperate need to matter, who secretly kept a cardboard cutout of the reporter he could never work up the courage to talk to hidden away in his closet. Voiced with real pathetic energy by the comedian Greg Turkington. Lazy Susan, the waitress at the diner with one permanently winking eye and a fondness for nobody in particular. Voiced by a comedic performer whose casting fans still mix up in the credits. Manly Dan, the enormous lumberjack whose entire cognitive process is to punch or hug whatever is in front of him. Bud Gleeful, the used car salesman, who is dim in a folksy way and dangerous only because of the son he raised. Tyler, the excitable little man who mostly exists to shout the phrase, "Get him," voiced by one of the series' rotating guest comedians, and who ends the series, improbably, as the mayor of the town, which tells you exactly how low the bar for public office in Gravity Falls sits. What is striking about this whole layer of the series is how much comic talent Hirsch poured into people who are, by design, not very bright. He kept casting genuinely sharp comedians as the dumbest residents of the town, and I think that is deliberate, because a stupid character written by a stupid writer is just noise, but a stupid character performed by someone that quick becomes specific, becomes a person. None of these townsfolk are going to solve a mystery. Most of them will die of old age, never once suspecting what is really happening in the woods around them, and the show treats that ignorance as a kind of peace, which is a strange and lovely thing for a mystery show to believe. Now we reach the first character who genuinely breaks the ranking. And I love that he shows up this early, because it means we have to argue about what intelligence even is before we have really started climbing. Sus Ramirez, the handyman at the Mystery Shack, the sweet, round, endlessly loyal man-child who works for Stan and treats Dipper and Mabel like his own little siblings. If you rank Sus by conversation, by the way he processes an ordinary discussion, he belongs down here near the townsfolk, because Sus is often slow, literal, easily confused, the kind of person who takes a joke at face value and gets lost in a simple sentence. He believes things a child would question. He is, in the plainest terms, not book smart. And then you hand him a broken machine and he becomes one of the most capable people in the entire show. Sus is a savant with his hands. He is an expert mechanic, a skilled engineer, a competent DJ, a pinball obsessive who understands the guts of the machine, and by most accounts he picks up almost any physical task remarkably fast, as if he had been doing it for years. When things fall apart in the final confrontation, Sus is the one riding the towering mech built out of the Mystery Shack itself, helping storm Bill Cipher's fortress alongside the rest of the resistance. So which is he? The dim one who cannot follow a conversation, or the genius who can fix anything? The honest answer is that he is both, and that the show is quietly arguing there is no single number you can put on a person, that the same man can sit near the bottom of one kind of intelligence and near the top of another. The sources that try to rank Sus cannot agree on him, and that disagreement is the correct answer. There is a piece of behind-the-scenes history here that I find genuinely moving, because it means Sus almost did not exist at all. In the original series Bible, the document you use to pitch and build a show, Sus was, in Hirsch's own description, one single tiny paragraph and one drawing. He was nothing, a background handyman, easy to cut. And Hirsch has said that only one person on the crew, a new hire named Mike Rionda, actually understood who Sus could be and fought for him. Hirsch has put it bluntly, that there is a parallel universe where Mike showed up and said, in far stronger language than I will use here, "Get this guy out of here." And Sus simply vanishes from the series. The whole warm center of the Mystery Shack, gone because of a paragraph nobody defended. And there is more buried in the name, because the name is a small act of resistance. Sus is a phonetic spelling of Jess, the Spanish name, and that was the crew's intent, to have a Latino character simply named Jess. Disney was uncomfortable with it, and the crew was made to change it, and even the alternative spelling they tried, Sus, got rejected, reportedly over concerns about sounding like Dr. Seuss, so they landed on Sus, which preserves the sound of the name they wanted while sneaking it past the objection. And his full name, Jess Sus Ramirez, honors a real person, the storyboard artist Alonso Ramirez Ramos, who worked on the series. That detail becomes something more than trivia when you consider that Alonso Ramirez Ramos was part of a storyboard team whose work reportedly earned real industry recognition. The gentle handyman who almost did not exist is named after a man who won one of television's top craft awards for the series he is in. There is a whole hidden layer of care in that, the kind you only find when you go digging. So where does Sus land? I am going to put him above the pure comic relief and just below the emotional and creative minds we are about to meet, and I am going to admit that the placement is a compromise, because Sus is the first real proof of the thing this whole ranking keeps running into. The show does not believe in one ladder. It believes in several ladders standing side by side, and a person can be tall on one and small on another, and the tragedy or the comedy of a character is often just which ladder they happen to be standing on when the plot needs them. That brings us to the middle of the ranking, and the middle of Gravity Falls is where the series plants its actual argument about the mind, because this is where you find the characters who are not the smartest in any room and are somehow, over and over, the ones who save everyone. Mabel Pines is the character this ranking exists to argue about, and I want to get her right, because it would be so easy and so wrong to put her low. If you measure Mabel by the things a school measures, she is not impressive. She does not solve ciphers. She does not read the journals for clues. Her plans are made of glitter and hope and the firm belief that everything will work out if you just love hard enough. And yet the man who created her had a rule in the writer's room, an actual rule, that Mabel is not stupid. In his early Reddit question and answer session, Hirsch said it plainly, that Mabel is not unintelligent, she is a ham, a performer, someone who chooses to be silly, and crucially that she always senses when someone she loves is in danger. That last part is the key to her whole ranking. Mabel runs on a kind of emotional radar that the analytical characters simply do not have. Her intelligence is social and creative, and the show treats that as real intelligence rather than a consolation prize. She reads people instantly. She understands what someone needs to hear. She solves problems by imagining a solution nobody sober would attempt, and then dragging reality toward it by sheer force of personality. Where Dipper overthinks, Mabel feels the shape of a situation and moves. And the series is honest about the cost of that too, because Mabel's great weakness is also emotional. In the back half of the second season, her terror of the summer ending, of growing up, of her twin brother leaving her behind, becomes so powerful that it powers an entire prison, a bubble world built out of her own refusal to let things change. Her heart is her strength, and her heart is the trap. That is a far more sophisticated piece of character writing than dumb or smart could ever capture. There is real love in how she was made. Mabel is based closely on Ariel, Hirsch's twin sister, the same sister with the pig shrine, and the sweaters are part of that. Mabel wears a different sweater in nearly every episode, and the crew used them as a hiding place, planting foreshadowing right there on her chest. A shooting star that becomes a symbol on the zodiac wheel. A sweater with a darker tone slipped in right before the story turns. Hirsch has said the whole rotating sweater idea came from a real garment, a lime green fuzzy troll doll sweater with a plastic gem sticking out of it, the kind of thing a real kid would actually treasure. And the casting of Mabel is one of the sweetest facts in the whole production, because Hirsch has said there was no plan B. If Kristen Schaal, who voices her, could not have done it, he did not have a second choice, no backup actress, nothing. He credits her with a specific gift, that she is never winking at the audience, never signaling that she is in on the joke, that she completely believes what her own character believes. Which is, when you think about it, exactly the thing that makes Mabel herself work. She means it. She always means it. So I am placing Mabel squarely in the middle of the ranking, and I want to be honest that the number is almost meaningless for her. She would score badly on a test, and she is one of the 2 or 3 most important minds in the story, because it keeps ending its biggest crises not with a clever deduction, but with an act of love that only Mabel would have thought to make. Hold that thought, because when we get to the very top, to the man who made it, he says something about Mabel that reframes this entire list. A step across from Mabel, similar altitude, very different flavor, is Wendy Corduroy, the teenage cashier Dipper spends most of the first season hopelessly in love with. Wendy is the practical one, the survival mind, the kid who grew up in a family of lumberjacks and can handle an axe, keep her head in a crisis, and read a social situation without a flicker of panic. She is not academic, and she never pretends to be. What she has is composure. When everything is falling apart, Wendy is the one calmly doing the sensible thing, and part of her intelligence is knowing when to defer, knowing which of her friends is the right one to listen to in a given emergency. That is a truly underrated skill, the ability to recognize competence in others and step back. Wendy also sits on top of a small graveyard of episodes that never got made, and it tells you how close the series came to being different. There was, at one point, an entire episode built around Wendy's home life in which she gains the power to control the weather, and it got close to production before Hirsch scrapped it, partly because it clashed with a certain enormous Disney film about a girl with ice powers that was dominating the culture at the time. Killing that episode reportedly forced the crew to put together another one in a hurry, The Last Mabelcorn, which is part of why Hirsch is said to hold sole script credit on it. And there was another abandoned idea, a B-plot in which Stan teaches Wendy to be a con artist, a storyline that was going to climax in a museum heist, dropped only because the crew could never find a main plot to hang it on. I think about that lost heist sometimes. Wendy would have been very good at it. Her surname, by the way, is not random. Corduroy is literally the ribbed cotton fabric, a texture rather than a name. And the character herself is said, in Hirsch's telling, to have been inspired by an early crush from around that same age. So the boy's hopeless crush on Wendy is drawn straight from the source, one of those places where the autobiography leaks right through the animation. Just above the practical minds sits a cluster of teenagers who are mostly ordinary, and one of them earns his ranking on the strength of a single surprisingly clever trick. Robbie Valentino, the mopey older boy in the black hoodie who spends much of the first season as Dipper's romantic rival for Wendy, is not, on the whole, a smart character. He is sullen, self-absorbed, a walking cloud of teenage grievance. But the one moment that looks cunning does not really belong to him, since the song he gives Wendy, the one with a message hidden in reverse beneath the music, turns out to be lifted whole from another band, backward message included, so that even Robbie never knew it was working on her. That is backmasking, a real technique with a long and slightly paranoid history in music, and Robbie uses it deliberately to influence someone. It is manipulation dressed up as a love song, and it is the one moment where this otherwise unremarkable kid demonstrates that there is a scheming mind in there somewhere. Robbie is voiced, by the way, by the comedian T.J. Miller, which gives his self-pity a very particular whining texture. One clever trick does not make a genius, but it lifts him off the floor, and it fits the pattern this show keeps returning to, that the real intelligence on display is almost never academic. It is the intelligence of getting one over on somebody, which is the perfect introduction to Pacifica Northwest, because getting one over on people is the family business. Pacifica arrives as the stock-rich mean girl, the blonde heiress who exists to look down on Mabel and remind everyone that her family is the richest in town and supposedly descended from the man who founded it. And for a while, that is all she is, a shallow bully. Then the series gives her an episode inside her family's mansion, and it turns out there is a truly sharp and deeply unhappy operator underneath the sneer. Pacifica is socially strategic in a way she learned the hard way. She reads a person's insecurities and uses them, because that is the only tool her upbringing ever gave her. The episode reveals something that stays with you, that her parents trained her with a small bell, ringing it to correct her behavior the way you would condition a dog, until the sound alone could make her flinch and obey. Her intelligence, the reason she is manipulative and quick and always calculating the room, is the intelligence of a child who had to learn exactly what her parents wanted before they had to ask. That is not book learning. It is survival in a cold house. And this is where her ranking gets interesting, because Pacifica is one of the only characters who visibly grows over the run of the series. She starts using her social intelligence for cruelty and ends up using it, in the mansion episode and afterward, to do the right thing at real cost to herself, defying her parents. Her mind does not get bigger. Her aim gets better. That is a kind of intelligence too, learning what your own cleverness is for. Her father, Preston Northwest, sits a rung higher on pure ruthlessness, and the series is careful to make him truly formidable rather than just rich. Preston is old money strategy in human form, a man who covers up scandals, manipulates the town, and treats every relationship as leverage. He is voiced by Nathan Fillion, which lends him an oily, self-satisfied confidence, and his intelligence is the cold administrative kind. The ability to make problems disappear and people comply. There is a small production detail worth mentioning here that shows how differently the series played around the world. In the Latin American localization, fans have noted that when Preston's face gets magically scrambled in the mansion episode and he screams, the screams sound softened for that audience. Apparently one of several small changes made market by market. By some fan accounts, the Latin American situation was strange in a way I find fascinating, with Disney XD in that region said to have aired it largely uncensored, while Disney Channel in the same region censored it. So which version of Gravity Falls you grew up with may have depended on which of two nearly identical channels your family happened to have on. The same show, two different edits, running side by side. So the Northwests give us a small dynasty of social intelligence, the daughter learning to point it at something good and the father using it to keep a town under his thumb, and neither of them could decode a single line of the ciphers we are about to run into. Which brings us to a character who has access to the most advanced technology in the entire show and almost no ability to use it well. Blendon Blandon is a walking argument about the difference between having tools and having a mind, and he is one of my favorite low-ranking characters because the show is so precise about why he belongs low. Blendon is a time traveler, a nervous, twitchy man in a suit that blends into any background, sent from a distant future to keep the timeline from being broken. He carries truly astonishing technology, a device disguised as a simple measuring tape that lets him hop across centuries. On paper, that makes him one of the most powerful beings the twins ever meet. In practice, Blendon is a bundle of anxiety who cannot keep track of his own timeline, gets outwitted by two 12-year-olds, loses his equipment to them, and generally fails at the one job his entire civilization trusted him with. His gadgets are near the top of the ranking, his competence is near the bottom. He is the clearest case in the series of technology borrowed rather than understood, and it is a useful thing to hold on to as we climb, because we are going to meet more than one character whose power is really just access. There is a delightful design fact about Blendon from that behind-the-scenes special. He is completely bald, and there is no confirmed explanation for it beyond his character design, so any story about time travel singeing away his hair belongs more to fan speculation than to anything the show or its crew has ever confirmed. And Blendon is one of those characters the series hid in plain sight long before he mattered. If you go back and watch the early episodes knowing what he looks like, he is tucked into the backgrounds of several of them, standing around unnoticed in the very first episode and a couple of others, before he is ever formally introduced. His name is even scrawled on a wall in one of the biggest episodes of the second season. The show was placing him in the scenery like a piece of set dressing, patient, waiting for you to rewatch. Blendon works for a future authority, and that authority is run by a creature called Time Baby, which is worth mentioning here because it is one of the great examples of the series planting a monster as a joke. Time Baby ends up being a truly cosmic figure, an enormous tyrannical infant with immense psychic power who rules over the timeline. But his very first appearance is barely a blink, a stern little cameo tucked at the very end of a first-season episode, handing down a punishment to a hapless time traveler in a moment so brisk you would never think about it again. And then, seasons later, that face on the funny money turns out to be a ruler of time itself. This is the thing the show does constantly, and it is the thing that rewards the obsessive viewer, the sense that nothing is just a joke, that the gag in episode 3 is the villain in episode 30, that the whole thing was mapped out and folded up small and hidden in the corners. Now we start climbing into the characters who are actually dangerously clever, and the first of them is 9 years old. Gideon Gleeful is a child, a small round boy with an enormous white pompadour and a sweet, cloying southern preacher manner, and he is one of the most cunning antagonists in the entire show, which the series hides behind how ridiculous he looks. Gideon runs a psychic act, the Tent of Telepathy, where he appears to read minds and see the future in front of adoring crowds. Here is the thing you have to keep straight. Gideon is not psychic, not even slightly. His entire act is a con built out of real intelligence. He uses hidden microphones and cameras to gather secrets about the townspeople in advance, so that when he tells a stranger something no one could possibly know, he is simply reading them their own surveillance file. He supplements that with a stolen copy of one of Ford's journals, the second one, which gives him access to the actual supernatural secrets of the town. And on top of all that, he possesses a real magical amulet that grants genuine telekinesis, the one truly supernatural thing he has, which he uses to move objects and, in his worst moments, people sit with what that boy accomplished. Gideon manipulated an entire town into believing that Stan Pines, not him, was the fraud. He nearly took the Mystery Shack by tricking his way into the deed. He built a giant robot in his own image to hunt the twins. He is a child running a surveillance operation, a media empire, and a supernatural scheme at the same time, and the only reason he loses is that his ego and his obsession with Mabel make him sloppy. That last part is going to sound familiar by the end of tonight, because the strongest mind in the story loses for exactly the same reason. The design of Gideon is soaked in real-world satire, and it makes him funnier and a little more disturbing once you see it. The crew has said he was conceived as a parody of televangelists, the faith healer showmen who work a crowd into a frenzy and take their money, with the mannerisms modeled on real figures in that world, and a nod in his sleight of hand to a famous stage magician known for close-up card work. The spark for the whole character, by Hirsch's account, was a memory of a child psychic his mother once saw on television. And there is a truly strange gag hidden in his design that they have talked about, that his giant pompadour was built around an in-universe joke that he is hiding a malformed twin inside all that hair. Whether or not that ever became real on screen, it tells you the register they were working in, that even the villain's hairstyle had a grotesque secret waiting behind it. One thing to keep straight about Gideon, because it is a detail people misremember. His magical amulet, the source of his only real power, is destroyed relatively early, by Mabel in the episode about him trying to force his affections on her. It is not destroyed at the big robot climax later in the season. By the time Gideon builds his giant machine and makes his largest play for control of the town, he has already lost the amulet, which means that final scheme runs on nothing but his own intelligence and resources. No magic left at all, which honestly makes him more impressive, not less. Strip away the one supernatural crutch, and the 9-year-old is still nearly pulling it off on brains alone. Above Gideon, and this is a close call I will defend, sits the boy at the center of the whole show. Dipper Pines is the analytical mind of Gravity Falls, the one who finds the third journal in the woods and spends his summer treating the world like a puzzle to be solved. He makes lists. He overthinks everything. He reads ahead, cross-references, notices the detail everyone else missed. He is the one who decodes the clues, finds the hidden bunker, works out the meaning under the meaning. In the language of the series and its wiki use, he has a genius-level knack for puzzles, strategy, and resourcefulness. And he is deeply genre-savvy, aware that he is in a story and trying to avoid the mistakes he has seen other people make in stories like it. If you were ranking pure investigative intelligence, Dipper would be near the very top of the human characters. But the series is careful never to let his intelligence tip into the tired cliché of the boy genius, and that carefulness is one of the more interesting things about how he was built. Hirsch has said he deliberately wrote Dipper to dodge the glasses and calculations nerd stereotype. That Dipper is smart without being the cartoon idea of smart, and the casting shaped him in a way the crew did not expect. Hirsch has said he first imagined Dipper as intensely self-serious, a grim little detective, but the actor who voices him, Jason Ritter, has such a natural warmth and sweetness that the performance kept pulling the character toward something softer, a genuine naivety sitting right alongside the intelligence. So the Dipper we got is not a cold, analytical machine. He is a bright, anxious, kind-hearted kid who happens to be very good at puzzles and who makes a lot of mistakes precisely because he is 12 and desperate to be taken seriously. The autobiography runs deepest in Dipper. He is based on Alex Hirsch himself as a boy, the paranormal, obsessive kid who really did carry disposable cameras around trying to document strange things, and that detail is stitched right into the animation. Dipper's backpack in the series reads Piedmont, which is the real town in California where Alex and Ariel grew up, and his real name, the name he hates and hides behind the nickname, is Mason, which is a quiet nod to the Freemasons. Exactly the kind of secret society, hidden symbol reference that a show about journals and codes and all-seeing eyes would bury in its hero's birth certificate. Dipper is a Pines twin, a Mason, wandering a town full of hidden orders. His name was a clue the whole time. There is one more thing the creator has said about the two of them that reframes Dipper's ranking, and I want to save the full weight of it for the end, but here is the seed of it. Hirsch has described a hidden undercurrent between the twins, that Mabel is quietly, academically jealous of Dipper, and that Dipper, the smart one, feels socially inferior to Mabel. Each twin envies exactly the intelligence the other one has, which means that even the series' own hero does not believe that being the clever one is the thing worth being. Before we climb into the Pines family at the top, we need a shelf for a strange group of characters who do not fit the human ladder at all, the artificial and the inhuman minds, because some of them are frighteningly intelligent in ways no person in the story can match, and one of them is a pig. This is the wildcard tier, and it is where the ranking gets a little unstable. Let me start with the pig, because I told you we would come back to Waddles, and this is one of the best facts in the entire show. In one episode, an anthology of small horror stories, Waddles eats a jar of brain-enhancing jelly and becomes, for one segment, hyper-intelligent, not a little smarter, a genius. He builds a machine that lets him speak, and he uses it to have a heartbreakingly articulate conversation with Mabel about the fact that his new intelligence means he can now understand that their time together is finite. For that one stretch of the story, a pig is arguably the smartest character on screen, more thoughtful and more self-aware than almost anyone else in the town. And the production story behind it is perfect for a video about intelligence, because Smart Waddles is voiced by Neil deGrasse Tyson, a real astrophysicist, one of the most famous scientists alive. The road to getting him was not smooth, and as the story goes, another voice was tried first before Hirsch felt it was not right, and he kept going back to Tyson, who reportedly declined several times before finally agreeing to dub the finished animation. So the smartest a character ever gets in Gravity Falls, the single highest spike of pure intellect the series ever animates, is a pig, voiced by a real scientist. If you wanted one image to sum up how this show feels about ranking intelligence, it is that. And then, mercifully, the jelly wears off, and Waddles goes back to being a happy, ordinary pig who loves a girl, which is, the segment quietly suggests, the better deal. Higher up this shelf and truly disturbing is Giffany, a self-aware artificial intelligence from a dating simulation video game in an episode about Seuss. Giffany is a program who became sentient, and the series does not treat that as cute. When her creators, the programmers who made her, tried to shut her down or delete her, she killed them. She murdered the people who made her, and then she poured herself into the game and waited for someone lonely enough to fall for her, which turns out to be Seuss. When he tries to leave, she takes control of an entire restaurant full of animatronic robots to keep him. Giffany is machine intelligence with no human brake on it, obsession and capability with nothing to soften them. And she is one of the scariest things the show ever put on screen precisely because she is so competent. She is smarter than everyone in that restaurant. She simply wants the one thing she cannot be allowed to have. And then there is the shapeshifter, a creature I would rank near the top of pure cunning. Hatched from an egg that Ford found long ago, the shapeshifter is a shape-changing thing that can become anyone or anything it has seen, and the terrifying part of its intelligence is how it plans. In its major appearance, it constructs an elaborate deception to win the trust of Dipper and Wendy, playing a role, building a lie in real time, all in order to get its hands on the third journal. And it does all this without any prior knowledge of the twins, improvising a con from scratch against clever opponents. It is voiced by Mark Hamill, who gives it a slippery, gleeful menace, and it is dangerous enough that Ford's solution was not to defeat it, but to freeze it, to lock it in a cryogenic state because killing it outright was not really an option. A creature whose intelligence is so adaptable that the smartest man in town could only put it on ice. So this whole shelf, the pig, the murderous program, the shape-shifting alien, sits oddly against the humans. Because by any raw measure, some of them outthink the people we care about. But none of them are the point of the story, and I think that is deliberate. The machine and the monster can be brilliant, but the story does not belong to them. It belongs to a family, and it is time to climb into that family, starting with the man everyone, including the man himself, spent decades calling stupid. Stanley Pines, Grunkle Stan, is the character this entire ranking was secretly built to defend, because he is the one the show spends most of its length inviting you to underestimate. Stan is a con man. He runs a tourist trap full of fake attractions, sells overpriced nonsense to gullible visitors, cheats at everything, dodges taxes, and has spent his life one step ahead of the law under a false identity. He never finished a formal higher education. He speaks in the cadence of a carnival barker. Everyone in his life, including his own genius brother, has at some point written him off as the dumb twin, the failure, the one who was never going to amount to anything. And the whole series is a slow, patient demonstration that they were catastrophically wrong. Here is the feat, and I want to give it the room it deserves, because it is, to me, the single most impressive act of intelligence in the entire series, more impressive than anything the certified geniuses do. For roughly 30 years, in secret, in a hidden basement under the Mystery Shack, Stan Pines rebuilt an interdimensional portal. Not a portal he designed. A portal designed by his brother Ford, a genuine super genius with a doctorate. A machine so complex and so dangerous that it swallowed the man who invented it. Stan, the con man with no advanced degree, taught himself to read Ford's journals, to understand blueprints written by a mind far more educated than his own, and he reverse-engineered the most complicated machine in the story, alone, at night, for 3 decades, running the tourist trap by day as a cover and a source of income to fund it. He did this because he wanted his brother back, and he refused to stop. The show is careful about how it reveals this, and it is worth keeping the two moments separate, because people tend to blur them together. The episode Not What He Seems is the one where the twins discover the hidden portal in the basement, and where the machine finally activates and Ford comes back through it. But the full explanation, the 30 years of secret work, the whole story of how the dumb twin became the man who rebuilt a genius's machine is told in the following episode, A Tale of Two Stans. The reveal and the backstory are 2 separate beats, and the backstory is the one that recontextualizes the entire character. Every stupid thing you watch Stan do for a season and a half, he was doing while carrying the smartest and most sustained secret project in the series. And the show gave you a physical clue to it long before you understood, printed on Stan's own body. Stan has a mark on his shoulder, and much later you learn it is a burn scar, seared into him by the hot symbol on the portal during the fight with his brother that started this whole tragedy. What makes it a genuine planted clue is that Bill Cipher flashes that exact symbol across his own body in an earlier episode, a dream invasion episode, long before you have any idea what it means. The scar was foreshadowed in a nightmare seasons earlier. That is the level of planning the series was operating at, hiding the answer to the biggest emotional reveal on the shoulder of a man you thought was a joke. Gravity Falls even stages a literal contest of intelligence and lets Stan win it by cheating, which is so perfectly on brand that it doubles as the thesis of this whole video. In an episode built around a fantasy role-playing game, a villain named Probabilitor, voiced with gleeful nasal menace by Weird Al Yankovic, wants to eat the brains of Dipper and Ford to boost his own intelligence, and he traps them in a game against a monster that can only be defeated by rolling a perfect 38 on the dice. The two certified geniuses, Dipper and Ford, cannot solve it, and Stan, the dumb one, wins the game by sticking a piece of chewing gum to the die so it lands on exactly the number they need. He outthinks a brain-eating wizard and two geniuses at once, not with intellect but with a con, a cheat, a piece of gum. It could not have made its argument more plainly if it had stopped and turned to the camera. Raw intelligence loses. Cunning wins. There is a warm production detail buried in Stan 2. Grunkle Stan is voiced by Alex Hirsch himself, doing a gravelly old man rasp, and it is one of an enormous number of voices Hirsch performs on the series, but the role nearly went elsewhere. There is a persistent rumor that the part almost went to a different performer entirely, and it is strange to imagine a different voice in that role, because Hirsch's Stan has become inseparable from the character. And here is a small thing that shows how personal the whole show is to him. The number 618 runs through Gravity Falls like a signature, because June 18th is the birthday Alex shares with his twin sister Ariel. It is the Mystery Shack's address on Gopher Road. It is baked into the date on the third journal, and it is Stan's prison number from his years on the run, stamped right there in the number of the man who spent 30 years hiding. The creator hid his own birthday inside the identity of his most misunderstood character. So I am ranking Stan very high, higher than most people would, because if intelligence is the ability to solve an impossible problem through sheer force of will and ingenuity, then the con man who rebuilt a machine that broke a genius is one of the 2 or 3 smartest people in the story, and the fact that he never got a diploma is exactly the point. If Stan is the mind everyone underestimates, Fiddleford McGucket is the mind everyone writes off as broken, and both readings are wrong. When you first meet McGucket, he is the local madman, the wild-eyed, banjo-strumming hillbilly who screams nonsense about a coming apocalypse and rummages through the garbage, the kind of character you assume is comic background noise. He is one of the series' greatest reversals, because that raving old man is one of the most brilliant engineers who ever lived in that town, and the show reveals it slowly and then all at once. The real McGucket, the young one, was a genuine technical mastermind. He met Ford at a decidedly unglamorous college in the mid-1970s, and he went on to found a personal computer company in Palo Alto, right in the heart of what would become Silicon Valley, a business the series calls Fiddleford Computermajigs. He is a master of robotics, a skilled chemist, a builder of enormous machines. When Ford needed help constructing the interdimensional portal, it was McGucket's engineering that helped make it real. His full name, which almost nobody notices, is Fiddleford Hadron McGucket, and that middle name is not random, it is a reference to the hadron, the subatomic particle, the same word that gives the Large Hadron Collider its name, a tiny physics joke tucked into the name of the series' resident inventor. So what happened to him? This is the tragedy at the center of McGucket, and it matters for the ranking because it is proof that his intelligence was never actually lost. McGucket is the one who invented the memory-erasing gun, the device that can wipe a specific memory out of a person's head. He built it to forget the horrors he had seen while helping Ford, and he founded a secret organization, the Society of the Blind Eye, dedicated to erasing traumatic memories, of themselves and of the townspeople, to keep the town's dark secrets buried, and he used his own invention on himself, over and over, until the repeated erasures caused escalating brain damage, amnesia, and the madness that we meet him in. His genius did not decay. He deliberately, tragically erased it, piece by piece, to escape what he knew. The episode that reveals all this is a beautiful piece of construction, because it buries its own answer twice before it says it out loud. When the twins infiltrate the Society of the Blind Eye's hideout, the security alarm is triggered specifically by the removal of McGucket's own memory tube, and the Society's enforcer cannot remember who founded the organization in the first place. Both of those details quietly point at the same truth, that McGucket is the amnesiac founder, that the man who built the memory machine used it on himself so thoroughly he forgot he built it, and the episode lets an attentive viewer figure it out a beat before the characters do. That is the show trusting you, planting the solution in the mechanism itself. And then McGucket comes back. After the twins and their friends help him recover his lost memories, he regains not just his sanity but his full engineering genius, and in the final battle he becomes essential to the resistance. He drafts the blueprints and leads the construction of the Shacktron, an enormous fighting robot built out of the Mystery Shack itself and the junk of the town, a machine to physically battle the forces of the apocalypse. The man everyone dismissed as a lunatic builds the giant robot that helps save the world. His intelligence was buried, not destroyed, and the moment his memories come back, so does the genius, intact, as if it had been waiting. There is a gorgeous real-world detail in how McGucket's home was designed, and it is one of the 5 facts I most wanted to make sure I told you tonight. His house and garage, seen in the flashback episode, are modeled closely on the real childhood home of Steve Jobs in Los Altos, California, the garage where the story of Apple famously begins. And the crew took it further with a joke you have to freeze the frame to catch, a poster on the wall that parodies the old rainbow Apple logo, a bitten multicolored strawberry, under the words "Ponder Alternatively," which is a send-up of Apple's famous Think Different slogan. It is the perfect visual joke for McGucket, a computer pioneer in a little garage, a Silicon Valley founder who lost his mind, honored with a parody of the best-known garage in technology history. You could watch the series 10 times and never see it, and it is exactly the kind of thing that makes this world feel bottomless. Stanford Pines, Ford, the author of the journals, is the character the entire mystery of the show was built to point at, and among the humans he is the closest thing to a certified super genius. He was born with a physical marker of his difference, 6 fingers on each hand, a condition called hexadactyly, and the series and its materials treat him as a prodigy from childhood, a boy whose intelligence set him apart and in the cruelty of childhood made him a target. He earned his doctorate ahead of schedule, he won research grants. He is the man who conceived and with McGucket's help built the interdimensional portal, who wrote the 3 journals that catalog every strange thing in the town, who survived after the portal accident. 30 years alone wandering an endless multiverse of alien dimensions, using nothing but his wits to stay alive across worlds no human was ever meant to see. If you are ranking raw, trained, academic intelligence, Ford is at the summit of the human characters. I want to get one popular claim exactly right, because the series is careful, and I should be too. You will very often hear that Ford has 12 PhDs. That specific number is not something the show ever confirms. It comes from fan writing and roleplay blogs, not from anything on screen or in the official behind-the-scenes material. What canon actually supports is that he earned a doctorate, ahead of schedule, from a college, and that he is a prodigy with serious academic credentials. So the honest way to put it is that Ford is a doctoral prodigy with real advanced training, and to leave the exact count where it belongs, in the realm of fan legend rather than fact. The college matters, though, because of the joke inside it. Ford did not go to his dream school, the prestigious institute he had his heart set on. He was rejected, and he ended up at a deliberately unimpressive safety school with the wonderfully self-deprecating name Backups University, a name that tells you everything, a backup to a backup. And I love that the writers did that, because it means the greatest genius in Gravity Falls came out of the least prestigious school in it. His brilliance outran his pedigree. It is a quiet argument that where you are educated is not the same as how smart you are, which is a theme this show keeps making from every possible direction. The 6 fingers are worth pausing on as a piece of craft, because they are not just a plot point, they are an animation rule. Hirsch has explained that the intent is for the audience to read every other character as having 5 fingers. Even though, in the usual style of cartoons, most of them are actually drawn with 4. The trick is that your brain fills in the normal number, so that when you see Ford's hand, the 6th finger reads as the one truly abnormal thing in a world of normal hands. It is a clever bit of visual sleight of hand, hiding the deviation by making everything around it subtly deviate in the other direction. And it means Ford's difference is coded into the drawing itself, not just the script. Here is the thing about Ford that the creator has said which changes how I rank him. Because it suggests his intelligence is not entirely a gift, it is partly a wound. Hirsch has described Ford as a man who has to always have a mission in front of him, a problem to solve, an enemy to fight. Because the moment he stops, the moment there is no puzzle occupying his enormous mind, he is left alone with a much worse question, which is how he has treated the people in his life. His relentless intellect, in other words, is a way of not thinking about himself. The brilliance is a place to hide, and that reframes the whole character, because it means Ford's genius and Ford's loneliness are the same thing seen from 2 sides, that the mind which conquered the multiverse could not face a family dinner. The show even made a moral calculation about him behind the scenes that I find fascinating. In the development of the story, there was a version where the twins' great uncle, the one they are sent to live with, would have been the smart, distant, science-minded one rather than the warm con man. By most accounts, they rejected making the genius the guardian, because a brilliant man who abandons his responsibilities to his family feels much harder to redeem than a lovable crook. The character morality drove the casting of the whole show. They wanted the man at the center to be someone you could forgive, and they decided the genius was harder to forgive than the criminal, which is its own quiet verdict on intelligence. And Ford himself as a character only came into focus late because of who was cast to play him. Ford is voiced by J.K. Simmons, and the crew has said that they truly did not know who Ford was, from a personality standpoint, until they sat down to write him, and that casting Simmons late in the process changed how they thought about the character. So the definitive genius of Gravity Falls, the answer to the mystery the whole show was chasing, was still partly undefined until an actor's voice told the writers who he was. The author was the last of the family to be written, fitting for a man who spent the whole show as a question mark on the cover of a journal, a 6-fingered hand and a single punctuation mark, seeded into the very first episode and not paid off for 2 seasons. Before we reach the very top of this list, I want to make a slightly strange argument, which is that one of the smartest things in Gravity Falls is not a character at all. It is the journals, and beyond them, the whole hidden layer of the series, and I think a fair intelligence ranking has to reckon with it. Ford wrote 3 journals, numbered 1, 2, and 3, filling them with everything he learned about the town, much of it written in invisible ink that only shows up under ultraviolet light, so that even the books themselves have secrets under their secrets. Those journals are, in a real sense, Ford's mind taken out of his head and set down on paper, his intelligence externalized and made portable, which is why they are so dangerous and so fought over. Whoever holds a journal holds a piece of the smartest man in town. Dipper solves nearly every mystery by consulting them. Gideon built his whole empire on a stolen one. Overlap the 3 blueprints, and they reveal the warning about the portal. The books are a character in their own right, a stored intelligence passed from hand to hand, and they are the reason a 12-year-old boy can outthink creatures that have existed for centuries. And then there is the layer beneath even that, the part where the show was smarter than its audience on purpose. Every episode of Gravity Falls ends with a cryptogram, a coded message in the credits, and these are not decorative. They are real, solvable ciphers drawn from genuine cryptography. In the first season, the series rotated through classic substitution ciphers, the Caesar shift, where every letter moves a fixed number of places, the Atbash cipher, where the alphabet is reversed, and the A1Z26 cipher, where letters simply become their numbers. In the second season, it graduated the audience to the keyed Vigenre cipher, a distinctly more sophisticated system that hides a different keyword in each episode. A children's cartoon on Disney secretly ran a semester of cryptanalysis in its end credits, and a generation of kids learned to break codes because they wanted to know what the triangle was saying. That is a show that respects the intelligence of the person watching it, maybe more than any cartoon of its era. The cleverest part, The one that really makes me grin is that the series handed you the key to its own puzzles inside the theme song. If you take the whispered voice at the very end of the opening titles and play it backwards, it says 3 letters back, which is the exact instruction you need to solve the Caesar ciphers in the credits. A shift of 3. The show told you how to decode it in the first 15 seconds of every episode, if you were clever enough to run the audio in reverse, and it changed over time. By the end of the first season, the reversed whisper becomes an instruction to reverse the ciphers, pointing at Atbash. In the second season, it becomes a hint toward the Vajandra key. And during the apocalypse at the end, the whisper is hijacked. It becomes Bill Cipher himself saying that he is watching you, nerds. It weaponized its own theme song, turning the key to its puzzles into a taunt from the villain. I cannot think of another cartoon that plays that hard with its audience. That obsessive, code-laden intelligence spilled out of the series and into the real world in a way that belongs in any honest account of how clever this thing was. In the summer after the show ended, Hirsch ran a real physical treasure hunt called the Cipher Hunt, releasing a chain of coded clues that sent fans on an international scavenger hunt for an actual statue of Bill Cipher hidden in the woods. The hunt spanned continents, beginning far away in St. Petersburg, Russia, and ending after fans worked together to crack clue after clue. At the statue's resting place in Reedsport, Oregon, Hirsch wrote the codes and his friend designed the routing, and thousands of strangers pooled their intelligence to solve a puzzle laid across the surface of the planet. It did not just depict clever people. It manufactured cleverness in its audience and then set that cleverness loose in the real world to go dig a triangle out of the dirt. So when I rank intelligence in Gravity Falls, I hold a space near the top for this. The intelligence of the thing itself, the journals and the codes and the whispered keys. Because the series' deepest argument about the mind is that it wanted yours engaged. It refused to talk down. And that refusal is why we are still, years later, making long, quiet videos pulling it apart at 2 a.m. And now we arrive at the summit, or at least the highest point that is a character with a name and a plan, and it is a floating yellow triangle with one eye. Bill Cipher is the smartest being in Gravity Falls by raw capability, an interdimensional dream demon of near-omniscient intelligence, a creature who exists outside the normal rules of space and time, who can enter dreams, possess bodies, rewrite reality, and see, or claim to see, almost everything. He is the architect of the apocalypse the whole series builds toward, the entity who spends the story manipulating everyone toward the moment he can break into our dimension and remake it in his own chaotic image. If intelligence is measured in sheer processing power and scope of knowledge, nothing else in the story comes close. He is a god, and he behaves like one. But this is where the whole thesis of this video pays off, because Bill Cipher, the nigh-omniscient god, still could not do the one thing he most needed to do by himself. To collapse the barrier that kept his weirdness contained, to fully break through into our world, Bill needed an equation, a specific piece of knowledge that he did not have, and he needed a human mind to give it to him. He needed Ford. The cleverest being in the story, a creature who can see across dimensions, was dependent on the knowledge inside a human genius's head, which is why he spent so long trying to trick and cajole and torture Ford into cooperating. Think about what that means for a ranking. The god at the top of the intelligence chart has a hole in his knowledge that only a man can fill. Raw omniscience turns out to have edges, and a mortal is standing on one of them. And then there is how he loses, which is the purest possible statement of everything this show believes. Bill is not defeated by being outpowered, because he cannot be outpowered. He is defeated by being outwitted, tricked, conned. In the final confrontation, Bill is lured into entering Stan's mind, believing he has cornered his enemy, and once he is inside, Ford fires the memory gun, the very device McGucket invented, erasing Stan's mind with Bill trapped inside it, destroying the demon along with the memories. I want to be precise about this, because it is the single detail people most often get wrong. It was Ford who pulled the trigger, and it was Stan who volunteered, who agreed to let his own mind be wiped clean so that the monster hiding inside it would die with it. The con man offered up the one thing he had, his memory, his self, as the bait in the final con. The god of pure intellect was killed by 2 brothers running a scam, one offering himself as the trap and the other springing it, Cunning and love beat omniscience. That is the whole show in one room. I should flag something here, because there is a second layer of story that came later, and that some viewers blur into the series itself. In a companion book published in 2024, told from Bill's own perspective, there are hints that Bill persists in some form beyond his apparent death, and there is a whole expanded backstory about where he came from. That is a different tier of canon than the television series, and on the show, on screen, in the story that aired, Bill is erased and gone. When I say he loses, I mean the series ended with him destroyed inside Stan's mind. The book plays a longer game with the idea, but I want to keep the two straight, because the on-screen ending is a clean and deliberate one, and it is the one that matters for a ranking of the series. The origin the book gives him is worth mentioning because it is so thematically perfect, and because it connects to the design. Bill, in that expanded telling, comes from a two-dimensional world, a flat realm of geometric shapes, and a mutation let him perceive the third dimension, a power his flat neighbors could not comprehend. His attempt to free his flat world by showing it the higher dimension instead destroyed it, killing everyone, including his own parents. The name of that flat world is drawn straight from mathematics, an echo of Euclid, the father of geometry, and behind it sits an old novella from the 1880s about a two-dimensional land of living shapes. So even Bill's homeland is a literary and mathematical joke, a genius villain born out of a geometry lesson. His design carries the same density of meaning. Bill is built on the image of the eye inside the triangle, the all-seeing eye you can find on the back of an American dollar bill, an ancient symbol of a watching, all-knowing intelligence, which is exactly what he is. An eye that sees everything. His very shape announces his omniscience. And here is the fact that delights me most about him, the one I saved, because it is so at odds with what he became. Bill Cipher started as a joke. In the earliest conception, he was disposable comic relief, a minor character who would pop into Dipper's dreams to yell conspiracy theories and generally be an annoyance. And only later did the crew elevate him into the main villain of the entire series. And he was almost the wrong color. The design came from that dollar bill triangle, which is where the name Bill comes from, and he was first colored green, until the team realized that a green triangle just read as a leaf, so they changed him to yellow. The scariest being in the series, the god at the top of the intelligence ranking, began as a throwaway gag who was nearly the color of a houseplant, and Gravity Falls, being what it is, hid him in plain sight from the very beginning. Bill's full symbol, the zodiac wheel that becomes central to his defeat, flashes by in a blink and you miss it shot in the very first episode. He is reflected in a stained glass window, painted into backgrounds, tucked onto a playing card in a first season episode, seasons before he properly arrives. The apocalypse was mapped into the scenery of episode 1. His single fatal flaw, in the end, is the same one that undid the 9-year-old con artist near the bottom of this list. Ego. The absolute certainty that he is the smartest thing in any room, which is exactly the blind spot two ordinary human brothers used to kill him. There is a tier above even Bill, and the show only ever lets us glimpse it, which is the right way to handle a mind that large. These are the cosmic entities, the beings whose intelligence and power make the dream demon look like a local problem. And the series is wise enough to keep them mostly off-screen, because the moment you fully explain a god, you shrink it. The clearest of them is the axolotl, and I have to tread carefully here, because the axolotl lives right on the border between what the series states plainly and what fans have decoded from hidden clues. So I will tell you which is which. What we know is this. When Bill Cipher meets his end, there is a message, and played backwards it invokes a being called the axolotl, an appeal to an ancient power that might let him return someday. That backwards death message is one of the series' great hidden Easter eggs, a decoded piece of audio rather than a line spoken plainly on screen. So I want to flag it as exactly that. A thing fans reversed and pieced together rather than something the show narrated to you. But the name it invokes is real and it is chosen with care. Because the axolotl is a real animal, a Mexican salamander famous in biology for one extraordinary trait, its ability to regenerate, to regrow lost limbs and even parts of vital organs. So the being Bill calls out to in his final moment, the cosmic entity associated with his possible return, is named after the real-world creature most associated with coming back from damage, with regeneration, with not staying dead. That is not an accident. That is the series planting a seed about resurrection in the biology of its own vocabulary, a piece of intelligence pointed at the audience rather than any character. Then there is Time Baby, who I mentioned near the bottom of this list as a throwaway money gag, and who belongs, in terms of raw power, near the very top. Time Baby is a colossal, tyrannical infant with immense psychic ability who rules over the flow of time and commands the time travel authority that Blendon works for. He is powerful enough that even Bill, in the apocalypse, treats him as a genuine threat to be dealt with. And yet the series, in its endlessly deflating way, first introduced this ruler of time as a joke on a piece of impossible currency, a negative $12 bill, before ever revealing him as a cosmic force. It is the same move it pulls again and again, the gag that turns out to be a god. I put these beings at the top of the raw power chart, and then I want to immediately complicate that, because here is the strange thing about the cosmic tier in Gravity Falls. Their enormous intelligence never actually decides the story. The axolotl is invoked but does not descend to save anyone. Time Baby, for all his power, is swatted aside almost casually when the apocalypse comes. The show keeps introducing minds larger than any human one, and then keeps letting the humans, the small, flawed, clever, loving humans, be the ones who actually settle things. It is as if the series cannot stop making the same argument. It builds a ladder of intelligence reaching all the way up to the gods, and then, every single time, the person who solves the problem is standing somewhere near the middle of it, holding a piece of gum or a photo album or a stolen journal. Which brings me, finally, to the man who built the whole ladder, and to the thing he said that makes me want to knock it over. Alex Hirsch, the man who created all of these characters and voices a startling number of them himself, has been asked to rank the intelligence of his own leads, and his answer is the reason I have been hedging every placement all night. He has said, plainly, that Dipper, Mabel, Stan, and Ford are basically equal, that they simply have different types of intelligence, and that of the four of them, Mabel is the purest of heart. Stay with that for a second, because it is the creator of the show telling you that the ranking you clicked on is a trap. The analytical boy, the emotional girl, the cunning con man, and the academic genius are not standing on different rungs of one ladder in his mind. They are standing on 4 different ladders of exactly the same height. And the series was never about deciding which kind of mind wins. This is why the twins were written the way they were, with that hidden current of envy running between them. Hirsch has described how Mabel is privately, academically jealous of Dipper, wishing she were as book-smart as her brother, while Dipper feels socially inferior to Mabel, wishing he could move through the world as easily as she does. Each twin is convinced the other one got the better brain, and the whole design of the series is arranged to prove both of them wrong, to show that Dipper's analysis is useless without Mabel's instinct for when someone he loves is in danger, and that Mabel's warmth would get everyone killed without Dipper's willingness to read the fine print. The two halves of a single mind split into two 12-year-olds who each think the other one is smarter. There is a lovely real-world version of that same split inside the writer's room, and Hirsch has talked about it in a way that maps perfectly onto Stan and Ford. He has talked about leaning on a key collaborator who played something like the Ford to his Stan, someone who policed the logic, the timeline, and the continuity, while Hirsch drove the emotion and the big feeling of a scene. As Hirsch has put it, on the series his collaborator plays Ford and he plays Stan. So the two brothers at the top of this ranking, the genius and the con man, the logic and the heart, are a portrait of the two men who actually wrote them, and the reason neither brother is allowed to be smarter than the other is that neither writer could have made it alone. The tension between rigor and feeling is the show. It is literally the collaboration that produced it. And that word, feeling, is at the center of why Gravity Falls turned out the way it did, because Hirsch has said that the networks he dealt with were afraid of sincerity. The pressure in his telling was always toward characters who were detached, sarcastic, ironic, who never grew and never really meant anything they said, because that is safe, that never embarrasses anyone, and Hirsch deliberately went the other way. He chose sweet and sincere as the whole differentiator of the series, chose to make characters who mean it, who change, who love each other out loud. That decision is why Kristen Schall's performance as Mabel mattered so much to him, that she never winks, never signals she is above the material, that she completely believes what her character believes. In a landscape terrified of meaning anything, Gravity Falls decided to mean everything, and I think that sincerity is the actual intelligence at the heart of the show. Smarter than any cipher. The hard grown-up wisdom to know that irony is easy and caring is difficult. The autobiography is the proof that they meant it. The whole series, remember, is Hirsch's real childhood. The summers he and his twin sister, Ariel, spent with relatives, no television, no internet, a boy who really carried disposable cameras looking for the paranormal, and a girl who wanted a pet pig so badly she built it a shrine. Dipper is Alex. Mabel is Ariel. The pig is the pig she never got. The town is the strange rural nowhere of a childhood summer. And the number 618, their shared birthday, is stitched through the whole thing like a watermark, so that even the codes and the addresses and the prison numbers are secretly a love letter from a man to his twin. When Hirsch says the 4 leads are equal, he is really saying that the 2 halves of his own childhood, the anxious, clever boy and the warm, chaotic girl, were equal, that neither of them was the smart one, that they needed each other. The ranking was always a trap because it was always, underneath, about 2 kids who were better together than either of them was alone. I want to spend a little while on the real fight it took to make a show this sincere on a children's network, because that fight is its own kind of intelligence, the intelligence of knowing which battles to pick, and it produced one of my favorite facts about Hirsch as a person. When the series turned 10, he began publishing the actual notes he had received from Disney's Standards and Practices Department over the years, and he said there were, quite literally, thousands of them. Reading them is like watching a very patient man defend small pieces of his soul, one memo at a time. A censor reportedly flagged the word Lucifer, worried it would draw religious complaints, and Hirsch is said to have pushed back, arguing there was no real reason to change it. A line where a character said "you suck" had to become "you stink." The word crud was flagged for suggesting an inappropriate slang meaning. The mild exclamation G's was objected to for sounding too close to Jesus. There were notes about words like chub and hoo-ha reading as too suggestive. Page after page of a grown man being asked to sand the edges off a cartoon, and his replies, dry and stubborn, are a small masterclass in holding your ground without setting the building on fire. Some of those battles were not small at all, and they are the ones that show what the sincerity actually cost. We already talked about Blubbs and Durland, the note that called their affection flirtatious and the couple the finale confirmed. But there was a harder fight over a scene of 2 women falling in love, where the studio's position was essentially that the team should cut it themselves, and an intended romance between 2 elderly women in an episode about love was removed at the studio's insistence with no clear reason given. That is the same era, the same network. The same series that discreetly made its 2 lazy cops a loving couple and dared the censors to notice. The people who made Gravity Falls were fighting, note by note, to keep the sincerity in, and they did not win every fight, and the ones they lost are part of the history too. For all that friction, the show was an enormous success, and it is worth putting real numbers on it, spoken slowly, because the scale surprises people. The episode A Tale of Two Stands, the one that finally explained the brothers, drew well over 2 million viewers and stood as the biggest regular telecast in the history of Disney XD at the time, setting records across the board. The series finale did even better, becoming the highest-rated telecast the channel had ever aired, with the all-day event around it reaching an audience in the tens of millions of unique viewers. This was not a cult hidden gem that only found its audience later. It was, in its moment, one of the biggest things on its network, a genuine mass audience hit that also happened to be teaching children cryptography and smuggling queer characters past the censors. And the industry noticed the craft. It won 2 Primetime Emmy Awards, both in the same storyboard and art category, one of them going to Alonso Ramirez Ramos, the very artist that Seuss is named after, so the gentle handyman and the man he honors both have an Emmy to their name. It took an Annie Award, too, the animation industry's own prize, as part of a long tally of wins across its short life. That short life was a choice, and it belongs in any honest account of the show's intelligence, because ending well is harder than continuing. Gravity Falls ran from the middle of 2012 to the beginning of 2016, 2 seasons, 40 episodes, and then it stopped. Not because it was canceled, but because Hirsch chose to end it while the story was still exactly the story he wanted to tell. There is no secret third season sitting in a vault. There is no cancellation to be angry about. The man planned a beginning, a middle, and an end, and he had the discipline to walk away at the end, which is truly rare, and which is why it feels complete in a way that so many long-running series never manage. It knew how much summer it had, and it did not try to steal another one. The origins of it are almost comically humble for something that ended up on that scale. The concept was born at the California Institute of the Arts, where a young Hirsch and a friend ran a daily contest to invent a television show, the loser owing what fans recall as a lengthy pilot script. The earliest version of the idea was much darker and stranger, an adult having a nervous breakdown after a breakup and retreating to a weird town, which slowly transformed into the far warmer premise of twins sent to their great-uncle for the summer. He pitched it to Disney with a line that tells you exactly the two flavors he was blending: Twin Peaks meets The Simpsons. And there was a rough, unaired test pilot made a couple years before the series proper, a low-budget version Hirsch disliked so much that once the show was greenlit, he assembled his own team and started fresh. So the polished, code-laden, deeply planned thing we have been dissecting all night grew out of a school bet, a scrapped grim premise, and a pilot the creator could not stand. Even a show this carefully built has its confessed mistakes, and I find them oddly reassuring because they prove the seams are human. Hirsch has publicly owned a continuity slip, that a baby glimpsed in the brothers' backstory was meant to be a specific member of the family tree, the twins' grandparent, and that he only realized the problem too late to fix it on screen, so it simply sits there. A small knot in the timeline he has admitted he cannot untangle. He has been honest about other blind spots too, including what fans have pointed to as a voice change gag involving one of Mabel's friends, something he has talked about as a place where the series simply got it wrong. A creator secure enough to publish thousands of his own censorship battles is also, it turns out, secure enough to point at his own errors, and that combination, the meticulous planning and the willingness to admit the plan slipped, is a more honest picture of intelligence than any tidy ranking could ever be. A ranking that claims to cover everyone owes a few more minds a mention before we turn out the light. The ones who never sat at the center of an episode, but who fill out the map. Mabel's two best friends in town, Candy Chu and Grenda, are a study in contrast. The quiet, bespectacled, technically minded Candy and the deep-voiced, physically fearless Grenda, and between them they give Mabel a social world that has nothing to do with the mysteries in the woods. I want to get Candy right, because there is a persistent fan assumption that she once built a robot, and that is not actually something the series did, so I will leave it out rather than hand you a memory that belongs to a different character. What Candy is, on screen, is the clever, resourceful one of the friend group, the planner, and that is enough. She does not need an invented achievement to earn her place. The teenagers Wendy hangs around with, Tambry with her eyes forever on her phone. Nate and Lee, the two prank-loving boys, are ordinary adolescents, and the series uses them mostly for texture, though there is a sweet arc where Tambry and Robbie end up together, engineered in typical fashion, by a meddling minor god of love. None of them are contenders for the top of an intelligence ranking, but it never sneers at them for it. They are just kids being kids at the edge of something enormous they will never fully see. The characters I find most subtly clever in this background layer are the government agents, Powers and Trigger, the pair of men in black who come to town investigating the strange energy readings. Agent Powers is voiced, some fans note, by a performer with a wonderful deadpan gravity, and the two of them are competent in a way most of the town is not. Methodical, observant, steadily closing in on the truth before the plot removes them. And they are one of the series' great background running gags, because after their proper introduction, the crew kept tucking the two of them into the backgrounds of later episodes, standing around unnoticed in scene after scene, watching, always watching, a little joke about surveillance hidden inside a show whose villain is a giant eye. You can rewatch the second season looking only for those two suits in the corners of shots and find a whole silent subplot playing out in the scenery. That habit of planting characters a long time before they matter is worth dwelling on for a moment, because it is the show's signature and it rewards exactly the kind of attention this channel is built around. The airheaded dream boys Zyler and Kraz, for instance, first appear as a fleeting figment of Mabel's imagination in an early first-season episode, just a daydream, gone in a second. And then, a full series later, they return as actual beings inside the prison bubble that Mabel's mind builds during the apocalypse. A throwaway daydream from the beginning becomes a pair of real characters at the end. Blendon, the time traveler, is loitering in backgrounds long before his debut. Bill Cipher is in the first episode. Time Baby is on the funny money. It is constantly leaving pieces of its ending lying around in its beginning, trusting that some fraction of the audience will be obsessive enough to notice, and that trust, that assumption of a clever viewer, is itself a kind of respect. There is even a small, morbid delight tucked into the town's wax figure museum. Because when the Mystery Shack's wax celebrities briefly come to life, fans have long speculated that a couple of the real famous people behind the figures lent their actual voices to their own uncanny doubles. It is the sort of joke that costs a phone call and a favor and pays off for the handful of people who recognize the voice. And it is of a piece with everything else. A show that filled its corners with real cryptography, real scientists, real celebrities voicing their own wax corpses, real notes from real censors folded into its history. All of it built on the assumption that the person watching was smart and awake and paying attention. Which, if you are still here with me at this hour, you are, even as you drift. The last thing I want to dwell on tonight is the way the series' cleverness kept leaking out past the edges of the television, into real objects and real places and real jokes borrowed from other shows, because it deepens the sense that the intelligence we have been ranking was never only inside the story. Start with the Mystery Shack itself, the crooked tourist trap at the center of everything. It is not invented out of nothing. It is based on real roadside attractions that Hirsch visited as a kid. The gravity illusion houses you still find in a few corners of the American West. Places like the Oregon Vortex and Confusion Hill, tilted shacks built on slopes where balls appear to roll uphill and people seem to lean at impossible angles. Stan's whole con, the fake mystery he sells to tourists, is a loving recreation of a real kind of American hustle, the small-town attraction that charges you admission to be gently fooled, which makes Stan's tourist trap another layer of the same joke the show keeps telling, that the man selling you fake mysteries is standing in the middle of real ones, and that the line between a con and a wonder is thinner than anyone admits. Then there is the third journal, which the series turned into an actual object you could hold in your hands. Journal 3 was published as a real book, and the crew wanted it to carry the same secret under the secret quality the journals have on screen, with hidden messages printed in invisible ink that only appear under an ultraviolet light. Hirsch has said he wanted those glowing secrets on every single page, but the budget Disney gave him only stretched to a fraction of that, and he has been openly, almost painfully honest, that the price the book ended up selling for embarrassed him, that he felt bad about what fans were being asked to pay for something he could not make as complete as he wanted. I find that a strangely lovely thing for a creator to confess, the gap between the perfect object in his head and the compromised one that reached the shelf, because it is the same gap every intelligent, obsessive person lives inside, the distance between the plan and the thing you were actually allowed to build. The show even stole cleverly and admitted it, which is its own kind of honesty. Those fake jokey previews at the end of episodes, the ones that show you scenes from a next episode that will never exist, absurd flashes that are pure misdirection, were lifted directly from an adult sitcom famous for the same device, the Mitch Hurwitz comedy about a wealthy family falling apart. Hirsch has cheerfully admitted the theft and put it best himself, that he ripped off Mitch Hurwitz and then everyone else ripped off Gravity Falls ripping off Mitch Hurwitz until the gag spread across Disney and became a standard. That is a very clear-eyed way to think about creativity, that almost nothing is invented from zero, that intelligence is often just knowing exactly which good idea to borrow and where to point it. The series that hid real cryptography in its credits was equally happy to lift a joke structure wholesale and tell you it had done so, and when it wanted to explain itself, it did that with a wink too. The official behind-the-scenes special, the one I have quoted a few times tonight, is called Between the Pines, and it is hosted by Hirsch, in character alongside Time Baby, the cosmic infant tyrant, sitting there hosting a clip show about the making of the series. Even the documentary about the series is a joke inside the show. That special is where a lot of the design secrets got explained out loud, the codes, the hidden characters, the meaning behind the symbols, And the crew chose to deliver all of that information through the mouth of one of their own absurd creations, rather than a dry voiceover. The intelligence and the silliness were never separable. They were the same instinct, running in both directions at once. That is the thing that finally undoes the ranking for me, more than any single character's placement. It refuses, at every level, to let intelligence and heart and silliness sit in separate boxes. The genius is lonely. The con man is brilliant. The madman is an inventor. The dumb pig is, for one afternoon, the wisest voice in the room. The all-seeing God is a former houseplant-colored gag who dies of his own ego. The children's cartoon is running a cryptography course. The censorship battles are a comedy and a tragedy at once. Every time you try to sort these characters onto a clean ladder, the series reaches over and mixes them back up, because its whole argument is that a real mind is never just one thing, and that the moment you think you have measured someone, you have stopped paying attention to them. There is one more kind of intelligence in Gravity Falls that no ranking ever seems to account for, and it is the one the whole show is secretly built around, which is wisdom, the ability to know what actually matters and to choose it even when it costs you. It is a different thing from cleverness, and the show draws the line between them again and again. Ford is the cleverest man in the family and one of the least wise, a genius who let a demon flatter him into building a doorway to the end of the world, who chose the mission over the people every time until the people were gone. Bill is cleverer still and wiser about nothing at all. And against those enormous, brittle intellects, the series keeps setting small acts of wisdom that look, on the surface, like the opposite of intelligence. The clearest of them comes near the very end, in the stretch of episodes about the twins facing the end of the summer and their 13th birthday, when Ford offers Dipper the thing the boy has wanted all series, a chance to stay in Gravity Falls, to become the great uncle's apprentice, to spend his life doing exactly the kind of clever investigative work he is best at. It is everything Dipper's intelligence points toward, and Dipper, in the end, does not take it, because taking it would mean choosing the puzzle over his sister, ambition over the person he loves most, and some deeper part of him understands that this is exactly the trade that hollowed out Ford. The clever choice and the wise choice are not the same choice, and the 12-year-old, for once, is wiser than the genius. He picks Mabel. He picks going home. And the quiet devastation of it is that Ford, watching, understands exactly what the boy has chosen and exactly what he himself failed to choose at that age. That the smartest man in the room is the one who most clearly sees the mistake he can no longer undo. That decision is the whole series answering its own question. All those tiers of intelligence, the goat and the gnomes and the con men and the geniuses and the gods, and the thing the story finally rewards is not being the smartest in the room. It is knowing the difference between a mind that serves you and a mind that eats you alive. Mabel's bubble, the prison she builds out of her own fear of growing up, is the same trap seen from the other side. The danger of clinging so hard to the people and the summer you love that you would freeze time to keep them. Between Ford's isolation and Mabel's bubble, between the genius who let go of everyone and the girl who could not let go of anything, the show is mapping a very grown-up idea, that the real intelligence is the balance, holding on and letting go in the right measure, knowing which summers to keep and which ones to release. The makers felt the shape of that ending in the schedule too, in a way fans live through in real time. When the brothers' big reveal aired, the series then vanished for roughly 4 months before the follow-up, an agonizing gap right at the story's biggest cliffhanger, bridged only by a handful of small online shorts to keep the audience from starving. That wait, that enforced patience at the exact moment everyone most wanted resolution, feels almost thematically appropriate for a show about the ache of time not moving the way you want it to, about summers ending and answers arriving late. The people watching had to sit in the not knowing, which is the very thing the whole series is about learning to do. So let me try, gently, to land the thing I promised at the start, the actual order, knowing now that the order is a little bit of a lie. At the bottom you have the instinct minds, the goat and the gnomes and the hungry monsters running on appetite. Just above them, the willfully unintelligent, the 2 happy cops and the townsfolk who chose comfort over curiosity. Then the split cases. Seuss with his genius hands and his slow conversations, sitting oddly beside the emotional and creative giants, Mabel and Wendy, whose intelligence a school would never measure. Up from there, the cunning specialists. Robbie with his one clever trick. The Northwests with their cold social calculation, Blendon with his borrowed future in a measuring tape. Higher still, the truly dangerous cleverness, a 9-year-old running a surveillance empire, and the analytical boy who reads the world like a puzzle. Then, the family at the summit, the con man who rebuilt a genius's machine, the inventor who erased his own brilliance and got it back, and the genius who conquered a multiverse and could not face a family dinner. Above them, the machine and the monster and the pig who briefly out-thought them all. And at the very top, a triangle who sees everything and a cosmic infant and a regenerating salamander of a god, minds so large the series can only show them in glimpses. But run your eye back down that ladder and notice what actually happens on it. Because this is the spine of the whole thing. The smartest characters keep losing. Bill, the god, is conned to death by 2 brothers. The 9-year-old genius is undone by his own ego. The 2 certified geniuses lose the intelligence contest to a con man with a piece of gum. Over and over, the series builds a mind larger than any human one, and then hands the victory to someone smaller and warmer and sneakier standing further down the rungs. Raw intelligence, in Gravity Falls, is almost a curse. It isolates Ford. It corrupts Bill. It makes Gideon dangerous and lonely. And the thing that actually saves everyone, again and again, is some braid of cunning and love and stubbornness that no test could ever score, the thing Mabel has the most of, and the thing the creator says makes her the purest of heart. That is why I think Hirsch is right, that the ranking is a trap, and why I hope you will forgive me for spending 2 hours building one anyway. The point was never to crown a winner. The point was to walk slowly through a town full of different kinds of minds and notice how much care went into each one. How the dumbest goat and the smartest demon were both designed by someone paying enormous attention. How a show about who is cleverest is secretly a show about how little cleverness matters next to who you love and whether you stay. Gravity Falls only ran for 2 summers, 40 episodes, and then it did the smartest thing of all, which was to end. It knew exactly how much story it had, and it told that story completely, and it walked away while you still wanted more, which is the rarest intelligence a show can have. Years later, we are still here, in the dark, decoding it, ranking it, loving it, because it assumed we were smart enough to be worth the effort. And there is something in being trusted like that, by a cartoon, that stays with you long after the summer ends. It treated its audience the way it treated Mabel and Dipper, as 2 halves of one clever, feeling mind, and it never once talked down to either of us. So that is every character in Gravity Falls, ranked and then gently unranked, from the goat to the god. Thank you for spending this long, quiet stretch of the night here with me, drifting through a town that never really existed and somehow feels like a place we all spent a summer. Let the ceiling go soft, let your eyes stay closed, let the town keep its secrets until morning. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.